What's up? Dan here from Code Noobs. And today I wanted to show you how to create a new Next.js project and explain the directory structure and the files that are created when you create a new Next.js project. So we're going to start off in this relatively short video. I just want to walk you guys through how to do this and what everything means. So over here you see I'm in VS Code. I have Node.js installed. I have Bash installed. I'm working with Windows here. So I'm going to run the command. It's very easy to start a new Next.js project. It's N as in no, P as in people, X as in X-ray, space create hyphen next hyphen app at symbol latest. So it's npx create next app at latest. Now, if I just hit enter here, the first question, and I'll show you, if I hit enter, the first question is going to ask me, once it starts to process here, it'll ask me what the project name is or what I want to name my project. And so, so here you go. It says, what is your project named? Now, if I give a name here, it'll then go through another series of questions to get all my preferences, but it'll create a new directory within this directory with the project name, and that's where the project will be. I don't want to do that. I want my project to be named new next project, which is the title of the directory that I created. So I'm going to cancel this out, Control C, we'll clear this. And let's run this again a different way. So we're going to do npx, same command, create next app at latest. Only we're going to put a space after latest and a period. That'll tell it to create the project within this directory, and it won't ask me what the name of the project's going to be. So I'm going to hit enter, let this do its thing real quick. And basically what happens is after you hit enter, you run the command create next app at latest. So two things are going to happen. It's going to ask us a series of questions to get our preferences to set up our new project. And also notice that we are using the at latest, meaning we're going to be using the newest version of Next.js available. That's not Canary version. So that's not still in development. If you wanted to use a different version of Next.js or a later version, you would specify that version after the at symbol instead of using latest. So let's go through the questions. The first question it will ask you is, do you want to use TypeScript? So if you're unfamiliar with it, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. It adds static typing and additional features to JavaScript. Basically, it allows developers to specify types for variables, function parameters, return values, so forth and so on. This helps you catch errors during development rather than runtime. Personally, I'm not going to use it now, but I also would recommend that if you're new, not to use TypeScript right away. Get comfortable with using Next.js with just basic JavaScript, and then move on to TypeScript later once you get that down a bit more. So we'll say no. The next thing it'll ask is, do you want to use ESLint? So ESLint is a static code analysis tool for JavaScript and TypeScript that helps identify and fix issues in your code. Basically, it ensures it follows a consistent style, adheres to best practices, and it analyzes your code against customizable rules. So this is nice. One of the cool things about this is that, if you're working with others, with a team, you can actually establish a set of rules to have standards, to specify exactly the type of standards you want, things like that. I'm going to say no in this case as well, because this is a project I'm just setting up for this video. And if I'm working by myself, I usually don't use ESLint. I just rely on myself and other extensions I have on VS Code. So we'll hit no for this. Next, we'll ask you if you want to use Tailwind CSS. I would say definitely yes. Tailwind's like one of my favorite frameworks for CSS. It's really awesome. It uses utility classes. It makes it super easy to get started, with your styling. It makes it all your styles are in the same place as the rest of your code. I love it. The other cool thing is if you say yes here to this, Next will configure Tailwind for you so you're ready to go out the door. It's really nice. So we'll say yes. Would you like your code inside a SRC directory or source directory? This is really a preference thing and has to do more with organization. Whether you say yes or no is up to you. I usually say yes because I like it. I feel like it gives you better organization within the project. But again, it's entirely up to you. You can try answering these questions differently if you want. You can create as many, example projects as you want just to see what happens, and that'll give you an idea. So I'm going to say yes to this. Next up is, would you like to use app router? This is recommended. So this is Next.js's way of handling routing. It's really awesome and intuitive. I would definitely recommend it. And we'll look at kind of what that means in a second. So we'll say yes. And then, do you want to use TurboPack for Next Dev? This is their newest, faster compiler so that when you're in development and you run npm run dev, which starts the development server, it's a lot faster. I would definitely recommend it. And the last question is, would you like to customize the import alias? I always say no. I'm just use the default one. It's easy. And that's it. So there you go. Now we have our project started. You can already see a bunch of files here created and folders right in my directory here. And it's going to keep running for a minute to install the rest of the node modules it needs to run. So one of the things you'll notice when you start a new Next project is, there's a they're fairly large in size when you start a new one, and that's in part because it has to install a lot of node modules. Most of these, they're required for development in order to compile your code, to run the development server, all that stuff that happens in the background. You really don't need to worry about any of that. And frankly, the only way that you'll usually interact with your node modules in a Next project is by either installing or uninstalling dependencies. Other than that, though, you really won't touch it. So let's look at what's created then afterwards. So we have our new successful project. You can see it was a success. In fact, we can even run npm dev to see what this looks like, to see the boilerplate code they give us. So let's run that. I'm going to clear this real quick. So when you want to run your development server in Next, you use the command npm run dev, and this will run the development server. So let's do that. We'll hit enter. And the default is localhost 3000 for Next.js. So you'll see it's already compiling over here. So let's go over to our localhost here. We'll hit enter. And it's starting the development server. It even gives you the information for localhost right there in the terminal. And there you go. So this is actually what it looks like. This is the basic boilerplate stuff that Next builds in when you start any new Next project. And it's nice because it gives you, some information, their documentation, where you can go to learn, other examples, things like that. Definitely recommend check out those links. They're helpful. All right, let's go back over here though and check out what is created when we create a new Next project. So you notice this .next folder, this only is created the first time you run npm run dev, and that is your development compiled project and all that stuff. So you never really need to mess with that. I wouldn't bother with it right now, especially if you're new getting started. The node modules, as I said, there's a ton of node modules that get installed when you create a new Next project. But generally speaking, you can just know that those are the packages that are required for development, for compiling, all of that. If you install or uninstall any dependencies, obviously the packages will be stored there within your project. You'll see under that a public folder. So the public folder generally contains, your assets, both for development and production. So any like logos, images, maybe like if you're making a portfolio site, like your resume, things like that might go in there, right? So it's files that you need for your site to work properly. So that's going to be your public folder. Then you see we have our SRC folder. So this is really like your project. This is where you'll be doing most of your coding, your work. And so I like the SRC folder too because it makes it easy. Like this is where, we're going to have our root project, our root page, our root layout, all of that stuff. Underneath this, and before we get back into SRC a little bit, I just wanted to point out a couple other files briefly. So you have your git ignore file. Any of you familiar with Git and GitHub should know what this is for version control. And the git ignore file, basically, it allows you to specify certain files or folders to ignore from version control. So if you notice here, right, the .next and the node modules, they're already grayed out. That means they're already being ignored by Git. And so it does have some default stuff already in here. If you notice, like, for instance, it'll automatically ignore .env files, it'll ignore a build file, or a build folder or directory, things like that. So that's awesome. That's already set up for you. You have a JS config.json file. And this is for configuration settings for JavaScript projects. It's particularly helpful for setting absolute imports, module path aliases, things like that. You have a nextconfig.mjs file. Basically, the nextconfig file is a configuration file used to customize and extend the behavior of your Next.js application. You can use this to enable experimental features, optimize performance, define build and runtime settings, and more. I would definitely recommend check out Next.js documentations. They are awesome. They have a whole section on the nextconfig file and what you can do with it, so check that out. You also have your package lock and package JSON files. These basically, so package lock, it basically stores all the information about the npm packages needed for your project, your dependencies, the version information, all of that. So that's an important file. You won't really mess with that. Package JSON stores similar information, but in a less detailed way about like, your project dependencies, things you might have installed, dependencies you might have installed, things like that. So you'll notice here we have our new Next project. And if you look, it has the scripts that we can use. So npm run dev, npm run build, things like that. You'll also notice that has dependencies listed. So React, React DOM, Next, and then your dev dependencies, Tailwind, and Post CSS. So those are the initial ones that we start with when we start a project. In addition to that, you have a README file. Generally speaking, your README, this will have some information in it already. Getting started with the next project, which is nice. They give you a lot of good information here, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. Generally, when you start a new project, you'll delete everything in this file and create your own. A README file generally includes information about your project, how it works, the tech stack you use, things of that nature. And then you have your Tailwind config.js file. And this is your configuration file for Tailwind. If you're new and just working with Tailwind, you might not mess with this much. As you get more advanced, this is where you'll add, like, for instance, you can add in plugins. If you're using Daisy UI or the typography plugin for Tailwind, you would add information here. You can extend Tailwind's sort of presets, like, their breakpoints for screens, for media queries, things like that. So this is a good file. Tailwind's documentation is very good. I would definitely recommend checking that out. So back to the important folder, right? The SRC folder. Now you notice this has right now just our app here folder. And within that, we have a favicon, global CSS, layout, and page.js. So with respect to these, let's just briefly talk about what each of these is. So favicon ICO, this is the icon that shows up in the tab of your browser. You can replace this. The cool thing about Next.js is if you put just a regular PNG file in there and just title it icon.png, it'll read that as your favicon. So you don't need to create a special favicon ICO file. You can use PNG works, and Next.js docs has all that information. You have a global CSS file. So this is for your global styling. If you're using any vanilla CSS, a couple things to keep in mind is one, this styling here from lines 5 through 21, that's just provided by Next.js for their boilerplate sort of example thing here when you run dev the first time. You can actually get rid of that if you wanted. The thing you don't want to get rid of, though, is the Tailwind imports. Those are necessary to use Tailwind. So leave those. You can mess with everything else, but leave those there. Layout.js. So this is your main layout or root layout file for your project. In Next.js, your root layout is going to apply to every page of your website. So this is an important file. This is where your metadata is for the project as a whole. This is where, basic information and any kind of stuff that you want to appear on all pages will go. So like, for instance, you'll often see that people put their footer, their nav bar in the root layout so that it applies to every page. Keep that in mind. Again, check out the documentation for detailed information. Page.js is basically your homepage, your index.html page, if you want to think of it that way. And we can see, watch, if we edit this page, you'll see changes directly on the screen here. So let's get rid of everything in here. Oops, not all of it. We want to leave the outer div, so let's get rid of everything else. And let's put a H1 in. And we'll real quickly give it some Tailwind style. We'll say, let's say text will make, oops, and 600. We'll center the text and we'll make text 7XL, fairly large. And we'll say, hello, my new Next app. Once that's saved, you'll see it come up over here. Boom, look at that. Super fast, isn't that awesome? So this is your index.html page. You can think of it like that. This is where, you'll put like most of the things for your homepage and for your app there. That's awesome. So that's the basic stuff you have when you start out in your next project. I did want to mention too, just real quick, how their app routing works. This is really cool. So this app folder is your principal directory for your project, for the pages of your project or the routes. If you add a new folder here, let's call it about. So this would be for an about route, i.e. like localhost 3000/about. In order to make this a route, all you have to do is add a page.js file. Just like you see down here, we have page.js. That's like our index.html. This page.js would be the equivalent of our about.html. So all we have to do here is add a quick function. So const page equals. Then we'll add an H2 here that says this is my about page. This is my about page. Okay, then we just got to export this. We'll save it. And now check this out. We can go up here, type about, and there you go. This is my about page. We just created a new route that easily. If any of you worked with React in the past without using Next.js, you know how I think frustrating the React router was and trying to use that and implement it. Next has really made it intuitive with just using the file structure. It makes it super easy. And it's one of my favorite features about Next.js. So there you have it. This is just a basic overview of how to create a new Next.js project. I definitely encourage you guys to create them, have fun with it. It's super easy. Again, Next.js documentation is awesome. Tailwind's documentation is very good and very easy to use. And so there should really be nothing stopping you from getting into these frameworks now and checking out what is the most popular JavaScript framework available, which is Next.js and React framework. All right, I hope you guys like this. Thanks a lot.